Hello, hello. Welcome to everyone who is joining. We are so happy to see you here for this webinar with Dr. Craig Zelizer. If you are here for the webinar about the skills, networks, and strategies needed to advance a social impact career, you are in the right place. We are going to give a minute to folks to connect to audio, join the room. Welcome. If you would like to let us know in the chat where you're joining from, what the weather is like, we would love to know. We'll get started shortly. And I'm joining from Malawi, and the weather is beautiful. It's about, it's about 25 degrees Celsius outside, 75 degrees Fahrenheit, so kind of perfect weather. We have Ola from Nigeria. We've got was that Minnesota? I need to open up my chat here. We have some, Minneapolis. So welcome, JC. We have Buenos Aires. Okay, so it's cloudy and cold. It is winter here as well in Malawi. We have Ghana. It's great to see everyone joining from around the world. From Cameroon. Really lovely. For those who are just joining the call, we're going to give it another minute or so. Oh, Sue, we're so happy to see you here. Jimmy, always nice to connect. Some familiar digital faces in the room. I know we're all big fans of Craig, so it's nice to see everyone here supporting. And we'll just give it another minute or so as folks are joining. Again, very excited for this webinar with Dr. Craig Zelizer on the skills, networks, and strategies needed to advance a social impact career. Oh, and it's windy. I hope, as long as it's not raining. I hear in Lagos it's been raining a lot, so I hope it's drying up a little bit. All right. So we will go ahead and get started. And Craig, and if you want to come off camera, I'll do a brief intro to you and then turn it over, because I know we're super excited to hear your presentation. I am luckily had a chance to take a look at it before, so you all are in for a real treat. We have Dr. Craig Zelizer here. He's the founder and CEO of PCDN, the go-to hub for global social change. And since its founding in 2007, Craig has grown PCDN to over 37,000 members, representing more than 180 countries. From 2005 to 2016, he served as a professor in the conflict resolution program at Georgetown University before stepping down in June 2016 to work on PCDN full-time. And we are really thrilled to have him here today as part of the Global Grid Initiative, as one of our mentors. And we'll look forward now, Craig, to take it away. We're going to have, I just say, sorry, a few housekeeping notes for folks. And I know we're putting this in the chat. But Craig, of course, wants this to be an interactive session. So please put your questions for Craig in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. It gets lost a bit in the chat, and we want to make sure that your questions are answered. So if you have them, go ahead and put them in that Q&A box. And Craig's has a really lovely presentation, and then we'll save some time at the end for Q&A, although I know questions will come up throughout. So thank you so much. And Craig, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Jennifer and Nexford University, and delighted to be here, and has been wonderful to be part of the Global Grid. I'm actually normally based in Medellin, Colombia, was just teaching in Paris for a month at the American University of Paris, and now we're in New York City, so we're on our way back to Medellin, so it's been very hot here. So what we will do today is, as Jennifer said, I'll talk and present some slides. We'll do a number of interactive exercises. And then at the end, would love to feel free to put comments in the chat box. And then again, would love to hear as many questions and insights from you. And I'll just say, Jennifer and I met the power of random networking. So Jennifer and I met maybe 5 or 6 years ago at the Making Youth Sense, the Making Sense has a global conference on youth employment and opportunity. And she used to work at IREX, where I worked 25 years ago. And so I think I saw the table, and we just had an interesting chat, and we both have a very strong interest in the future of work and social impact careers. And so there's been lots of informal collaboration, and I've learned so much from Jennifer. and excited about Nexford because a lot of the work that I do is on the future of education and upskilling and future of work. And, I still teach around the world. And, I think Nexford is democratizing access to upskilling in a positive way that is helping provide the skills, talent, pipeline to actually, for the careers of the future, because a lot of education institutions, in my opinion, and I do a lot of research in this, are training people for the careers of yesterday. So I'm going to hit the share screen. So hopefully that will work. And then I'll go to full screen, and great to see people. I saw at least one person from Latin America. So great to see everyone from across Africa and across the world. And I'm just trying to get to the full screen mode. Okay. So this is the title. Everyone can see that. So we're going to start off. This is what we're doing today. So we're going to do an interactive exercise called Social Impact Bingo. We're going to look at some key trends around the future of work, upskilling and networking, and career impact careers. How to find your want. We'll explore that a little bit. That's a much more in-depth topic. We'll talk about some emerging skills and career tracks, networking for impact, which Jennifer is a master at, and then just some key resources. And again, great, please keep letting us know where you're zooming in from, and it's wonderful to have so many people. So this first exercise, if anyone's ever played bingo, I think back when I was like 10 or 11 years old, I remember a friend's mom took my friend and I to a bingo hall in the US. And that was back when everything was still smoking. So that part was disgusting. But I know like I won a bingo card and won like $5. It was super exciting at whatever age I was at. So what I'm going to do in this is, if we were in person, we'd do this differently. I'm going to read off probably 4 or 5 boxes. I won't read them all. When I read off a box, if you know this piece of information or have completed this activity, then in the chat box, please write, for example, the first box is anyone currently working in upskilling for a skill related to impact careers? So if that's true for you, if you're currently right now, or let's say in September, since you might be on summer break, working on upskilling, someone's saying, Sue, yeah, at the top, it's missing the Nexford bingo. Thanks, Sue. So if you are working on upskilling, just write 2 to 3 words, what skill you're working on. And so I'm going to read off those boxes. And for example, if you can define what a B Corps is and provide an example, then you would say B Corps is, and show an example. So let's start off with the first box. How many people are currently...
Craig, I don't know if you're able to maybe flip it. We're just seeing a blend of, okay, yeah, maybe share it again.
Is that not working? Let me do stop.
It was just mixing, yeah, let's see.
Is that okay, or I should reshare?
Maybe reshare.
Okay, yeah, it's the challenges sometimes of Zoom. It's weird because we did the test before, but I'll give it another. Let me just do. So while we're waiting, the first box says, are you currently working on upskilling? So if you're currently working on upskilling in something related to your career, please put in the chat box what skill you're working on or will be working on, let's say, starting after a summer break if you have one. Oops. Can people see the screen now, Jennifer?
Looks great. Yes, we can see it.
Yes, yeah, please let me know. Sorry about that. So let us know what skills you're currently working on building. So put that in the chat box, and I'll just wait about 20 seconds. Are you, so Jesselyn, and also remind us where you are. So Jesselyn, digital marketing. David, hi David, good to see you. Upskilling and facilitation. Peace is working on negotiation skills. Jennifer's working on Chichewa language, resilience. Any more out there? Storytelling, that is a great one. Leadership and communication. Hi, Juliana, nice to see you. So probably the most important thing I'll say today, at least in my opinion, is that the #1 skill to stay competitive for impact careers is the ability and the desire for continuous learning. So in the past, I think many people had the image, if you were fortunate enough to go to higher education and complete an undergrad or graduate degree, then your training was mostly done, not 100% done, but mostly done. In reality, the world of work and education is changing so fast that a degree is a stepping stone. It's a credential. It helps you build a solid set of analytical, practical communication skills. But for most jobs, you're going to need to be continuously upskilling, and the skills that were required in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years, it's almost, we don't even know them all. So it's, if you can just drill into your minds, and whether you're engaged with Nexford or another institution of learning or an upskilling program, having that attitude of curiosity and continuous learning. So I'm always working on different skills. I mean, I live in Colombia, I'm working in my Spanish. I've been working a lot, improving my design skills. I'm always working, because PCDN, my social enterprise, is a small startup, so I'm always working on financials. So it's great to see this amazing list of skills here. I'll I'll read off: project management, lifelong learning, leadership, resilience, inclusion. Oops, sorry, just jumped around. So this is wonderful. Constructive community and stakeholders engagement, animation, it's a great skill set. So the other things I'll say, it's not enough just to work on skills, it's to think about what skills do you need to advance, whether you're a professional with 20 years experience or a junior professional, that match where the jobs currently are and where they're likely to be in the next decade or two. So one of the things that's really important to think about is not just upskilling, but upskilling that actually helps you increase your employability, or if you're going to start your own thing, your ability to build your own startup or nonprofit. So I'm going to say here, who can name at least 3 SDGs? So if you can name 3 SDGs, then you can either put, first, I'm curious, can anybody tell me how many SDGs there are, Sustainable Development Goals? So if you know the number, put that down. And then can you actually name, not the numbers, because the numbers don't mean much, but 3 categories of SDGs. So there are 17 SDGs, that is great. And Candelaria, you win. If we could give you virtual chocolate, so maybe Nexford needs to start building some NFTs and virtual chocolate. But you end poverty, gender equality, access to water, great. So one of the things when you're thinking NFT chocolate coming soon, I wonder if Nexford offers a class on Web3, or maybe you should. So thank you, Peter. So one of the things to think about as you're whether again, you're mid-career, junior, or senior, is one of the best frameworks. It's not perfect as you think about exploring social impact careers, is to make sure you are fully embedded and understand the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, 16 of them focus on subject areas, clean water, infrastructure, education, employment. And then number 17 is all about partnerships. And that's one of the key things. Thanks, Juliana, for putting that down. So that if you haven't looked at the SDGs, my advice is go to the UN, UNESCO, or any part of the UN or UN SDG page, start exploring the SDGs that are most interesting to you. And then within each SDG, there's very clear indicators of, how are they going to operationalize them? How do we know if we're achieving success? There's all sorts of reporting mechanisms. For people who don't know, the SDGs came out of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, which was really the first big attempt by the international system to quantify and start setting achievable metrics for international development. We largely failed at a lot of the MDGs. So the SDGs, they're super ambitious, they're wonderful, they're beautiful. We're not going to achieve them, particularly because of COVID. The world needs to be spending 2 to 3. So I think Lancine's asking, will this webinar be shared? Yes, it'll be recorded. Nexford will let you know about that. So we're not going to achieve the SDGs. I wish I could say we would. The world needs to be spending $2 to $3 trillion a year, in income to help develop the SDGs. We're only spending on international development about $135 billion. And there's lots of other ways, it's bilateral aid. So, but at least understanding it and the metrics is quite important. So I'll read off 2 more boxes and then we'll move on. Who can define what a B Corp is and provide an example of a B Corp? Good to see you, Samuel. So can anyone define what a B Corp is? And does anyone work for one or have an example of an existing B Corp? So let's wait 15 seconds. So again, the box is, what is a B Corp? So Jennifer wrote Ben & Jerry's. Yes, Ben & Jerry's is a good example. KPMG is not a B Corp. But can someone define what a B Corp is? You can just put a couple of words. Candelaria, define what is a B Corp. It's a type of business. So we have Ben & Jerry's, which is a B Corp, I think still. Okay, I'll wait 10 more seconds. So Jennifer wrote triple bottom line: impact, profit, and people. So people, planet, and profit. Bingo, no, it's B Corp. So JC has a great example. Thank you, JC. Company that dedicates a specific amount of their revenue towards the SDGs. Not exactly, but close. So I think between JC and Jennifer's, that's the best thing. So if you're interested in B Corps, a B Corps stands for Benefit Corporation. And what it is, it's a global movement. It's been around about 15 years, and there's about 4,000 B Corps in the world, all over the world. Where I live in Colombia, I think there's about 20 to 50. You know, in the US, there's probably about 1,000. I'm on the advisory board of a B Corps, which I'll put it in here. Jennifer knows them. Techchange.org, which is a beautiful, amazing B Corps. So the reason I'm mentioning B Corps is what it is as you're thinking about impact careers, one of the things that's very important to be aware of is there's a term called greenwashing or pinkwashing, or there's a lot of discourse around purpose and impact, and we should all make the world a better place. But there's also a lot of bad behavior and bad practices. So one of the things as a job seeker at any stage is to really building an impact career. You can do it in the nonprofit sector, the for-profit sector, foundations, education, government. You don't have to, you can make impact in any sector. And too many people, in my opinion, when they think about impact careers, they think, oh, I want to work for the United Nations or a nonprofit, which those are great careers, but you can make an impact in any single organization or sector. And if you're particularly interested in the intersection, because a lot of the upskilling and training and courses that Nexford provides, particularly the MBA, are really strong for people looking at business and social impact. So you might want to work for a bank, nothing wrong with that, or you might want to work for a fintech company or something else, or a startup. But if you really want to have a sense of how do you vet an organization or a company to know that it's not just saying they do good, but they actually do good, B Corps is a rigorous certification that the companies go through where they have to apply, they provide metrics on their sustainability, how they treat their people, how they engage with the wider world. And there, I'll share at the end, there's actually a job board called B Works, which is only for jobs at B corporations around the world. And there's jobs in marketing and sales and communications. A fair number of those are remote, not all. But that's one of the things is how do you find the organizations or the companies that fit impact? And we'll talk much more about that. So I'm going to move on in slides. Can people see this slide, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is one of my favorite slides, and this is from an organization called the Amani Institute. I'm on their advisory board, or was for many years. Actually, I just got off because the co-founders left. Still going strong. So as you think about an impact career, and I've done a lot of applied research in this, particularly, I originally come from the peace building field, and I've published a bunch on what are the gaps between what graduate programs are providing and skills, what employers need, and what students get. So I'll give two short examples, and then I'll explain this model. So my wife, Catalina, and I, we met doing our PhDs. We both have PhDs in conflict resolution. We actually fell in love through dancing. That's a whole nother story. And so I love to dance. So if you look at this model here, I love dancing and art. I did my PhD dissertation, arts and peace, but I just love the arts. And so I love it. Am I good at dancing? For a gringo, that's what I'm called in Colombia, like I'm good, but I'm not great. Does the world need more dance? I think the world does need more creativity, arts, and dance. Is anyone gonna pay me to dance? Absolutely not. Like I'm just not good, especially compared to the average Colombian. I'm just not that good. So one of the things that when you think about your career model, lots of people talk about purpose, which might be here, you love it. But purpose is insufficient because what this model talks about, and I disagree a little bit here with where it says you're great at it. You don't necessarily have to be great at it. You have to have the ability to develop skills at it. Hi, Daniel, nice to see you. Oh, Amani, we were just talking about Amani Institute, Danielle from Brazil. So when you're thinking about your career, don't just think about your passion. Think about, how do you upskill? Are you good, or can you become good at it? You don't have to be the best. My 11-year-old son wants, he's very good at soccer. He dreams about being the next Messi. I don't know if he will be, but, but like, you need to be able to be good at it. Thanks, David, for Igagi. This model comes from that model. Thanks for sharing that. And David works for TechSoup, a really good organization, which is great to look at for tech resources and helping nonprofits around the world in the tech community. So as you think about your career, you really need to think about, is there a market for your skills, or can you create a market? And this bottom part where you're going to get paid for it or be hired is one of the gaps I see many people missing out. And through your coursework, talking to mentors, joining professional associations, this is so important because it's not about just upskilling. It's upskilling to understand either if you're going to create your own startup or be hired by others. And one other quick example, and then I'll move on, is I have a PhD in conflict resolution. Lots of people want to work as mediators, where they get trained as mediation. It's a great skill set to be trained as a mediator. However, the supply side of the number of the supply side of mediators in the world is quite large. The demand side of who's willing to hire and pay mediators is quite small in terms of paid employment. So there's an oversupply of people trained in mediation who dream about mediation careers. The demand side is much smaller. And obviously you have to look at your regional, geographic specifics, and obviously remote work's opening a lot. But this is one of those things, like, do your research, particularly if you're exploring degree programs or in school or upskilling. Don't just sign up for something, understand where the jobs are now and where they will be. So let's just take 15 seconds, and please keep sharing your tips and your strategies, and let us know if you're coming later where you're zooming in from. So it looks like, I think we have about 25 countries, Nigeria, Ghana, Brazil, the US, Argentina. So keep letting us know where you're coming in from. So in this short one, I just want to wait a minute, and I would like to ask everybody, when you thought about being a kid, or when you were a kid, and adults would ask you, what do you hope to be when you grow up? If you're open to putting down 2 to 3 words or a sentence, like, what did you dream about doing when you were a kid? And let's just see what comes in. Hi, Abukar from Nigeria. Hi, Rebecca from Honduras. But let us know, what did you dream about doing as a kid? So God gift was a pastor, Candelaria, a teacher. Don't think about what you're doing now. As a kid, what did you dream about doing? So Jimmy, an advocate, Jennifer, ambassador. We still got time for that. Toby, doctor. Actually, doctor's popular, lawyer, doctor, engineer, pilot. Okay. Lawyer, and became a lawyer, doctor, fashion designer, very cool, psychologist. So this is fun to see. I could spend all day just looking at this. Psychologist. Any other things people dreamed about being as a kid? Working at the UN, another fashion designer, businessman, writer, professor, chemist. I think that's the first chemist, nurse. Okay, anybody else? Human resource manager, UNICEF, software engineer. Okay, so there's some really interesting. One is this idea of what you dreamed about being as a kid, and it didn't have to be one thing. I think I used to, when I was a kid, I knew I loved business, and I knew I was concerned about the world. And I also loved to ski. So I thought about, something to do with global affairs and business. And I also thought about being a ski bum, but I did ski, and I did work a little bit at a ski resort, but it didn't have enough social impact component for me. So there's some really interesting research, and this comes, if you don't know the work of Adam Grant, I don't think I put his work in this presentation. He's from the Wharton School, and he's got a great podcast, a TED podcast on careers. Oh, Abukar, MBA player, that's very interesting. I'm curious if you will or have made it to the MBA, or let's say regional equivalent. So Adam Grant from the Wharton School, again, like, read all of his stuff, listen to his podcast. He suggests, and more research is showing this, that it's not the best thing to say to kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? One of the better ways, in my opinion, this comes from research, and particularly if you're starting to think about impact careers, is instead of focusing on what do you want to be, try to think about what challenges in the world do you hope to address. So don't start with the job, start with the things, do you want to, we're in climate crisis, everyone knows that. Do you want to work on sustainability, which is not a job, that's a sector, or it's an industry. Or are you curious, how in the world can we, get the 3 to 4 billion people who don't have strong access to the internet, get them all connected? Or are you concerned about girls' education? So one of the ways to think about your what and your career is move away from a focus on roles to be, what are the issues, the sectors, or the challenges you hope to address It could be in your community, your country, or globally. So that's just a little tidbit. Some key skills for the future, and this comes from all sorts of my own research and from lots of others. So one of the things I really like to say is that if you speak tech, geek, and human, that you are very likely to have thanks, Davis, parenting advice, yes. Yeah, I mean, Jacob, our son, wants to be a soccer player, but he also likes math and he likes business too. So if you speak tech, geek, and human, you are likely to have a very, so Constance, I'll get to your question. What if you know what you want to address, but you can't see a way to do that? So please ask that question again at the end. That's one of the key challenges, and we'll get to that. And so please put that in the Q&A part to make sure we get to that. So, you know, one of the things that I suggest is that obviously tech is becoming increasingly important in the world, both has a lot of positive uses that we can all be sitting around the world and be connected on Zoom or any other platform. That's amazing. I remember, I mean, I lived abroad for many years. I mean, I live overseas now, but I'm originally from the US, but I lived in Central and Eastern Europe for almost 6 years. And I remember in early 1990, when I moved to Hungary, about 6 months, 8 months after the Berlin Wall came down, like to call back to the US with my calling card was insanely expensive. I mean, it was like crazy. And it's like now we can all be connected. I mean, people have decent internet access and chat with hundreds of people around the world. It's unfathomable. It's amazing. So if you speak, you know, if you have strong human skills, and that means communication, collaboration, empathy, and you understand tech, or you actually know how to code or build drones or work with Web 3.0 or NFTs, the people who can do both, again, eventually AI and machine learning is going to become it'll increasingly replace a lot of jobs. New jobs will be created, but that understanding of both is really one of the critical skill sets and knowledge sets. And it doesn't mean you have to be a coder. You just need to know enough about tech and understand how it relates to the areas where you want to have an impact. Understanding the business of change. I'll go for about 15 more minutes and then we'll open up for questions. So this is another gap area where I see lots of people missing out, where, you know, whether you work for a foundation, a nonprofit, the US government, the Nigerian government, Nexford, you know, all things require resources, energy, and human capital to do work and advance work. And I find a lot of people are like, I want to work in sports and peace or sports and youth development, which is a great field. There's more and more organizations using the power of sports to advance social change all over the world. But they don't understand or do the research. Where does the money come from? You know, is it from FIFA? Is it from foundations? Is it from local business? And why do organizations, whether it's individual donors, foundations, governments, bilaterals, provide that money? So understanding this business of change is one of the most important skill sets and just knowledge areas. And, you know, we can talk about that. Using data for impact and storytelling, super important. And I know Nexford has a good number of courses on this, I think particularly in the MBA, but understanding both how to tell stories with words, but also data, and being conversant and fluid in analyzing data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. And also one of the important skills I forgot to put here is evaluation. You know, like I was, you know, if you're working for a nonprofit and you're working on increasing literacy of displaced people in terms of education programming, how do you know that the intervention or program that was done or could be done actually affected or led to some change? So that evaluation component, you know, if you're working on a social media campaign for a marketing agency, it's not enough to say, oh, we spent this amount of money. Like, was it worth it? What were the results? And clicks are not sufficient. It's like, how do you say, you know, if you invested $500 in a marketing campaign and you say you got 500 clicks, that still doesn't tell a story. So it's being conversant in the data relevant to your industry. Continuous learning, we already talked about, and creativity, empathy, and communication, we've mentioned. A couple of other skills. One of the challenges in the world is that, and I'm going to put a little plug out there for Apple TV. I don't have any, I own a little bit of Apple stock, but I don't have any, you know, financial stake in this. But if you can get access to Apple TV, There, I think, is one of the best shows I've ever seen on the future of work, called Severance. Ben Stiller, the comedian, directed it. I think it's got a bunch of Emmy nominations, which is like the Academy Awards for TV. And I was just listening to a program about this show today, and one of the things about change is that we're all embedded in our own silos, both sectorally and institutionally. And I published a couple of books. I did one, this is probably like 7 years ago, called Integrated Peace Building. And the idea is, how do you approach peace building, not just from a single sector, but across sectors, health and education and emergency relief and arts. And I've given lots of talks about the book, and I gave one talk at USAID. And I've consulted for USAID a lot, US Agency for International Development. And one of the things I challenged people with, and I don't have the answer, I just have the question, is that if you think about the 17 SDGs, all these sectors are important. Like, everybody should have clean water and access to housing and basic education. And most organizations and people approach social challenges from their particular sector or point of view. But no single organization or sector or person is going to solve the world's problems. It's the ability to collaborate and work together. So this is actually one of the most important skills. And the reason I connect this to Severance, so at USA, when I asked the question, I said, you work in education, you work on health, like, what's the framework, or how do you decide what's more important? Because they're all important, and we don't have a good answer for that. And so the reason I mentioned Severance is it's a brilliant show that actually shows how an organization can be completely siloed and nobody actually understands what anyone else does, but it connects to the future of work and all sorts of ethical questions around identity and autonomy. So I would encourage people to watch it. And if other people have interesting shows you'd want to recommend, whatever channel that's connected to some of these topics, feel free to put them in the chat. So conflict resolution, cross-cultural literacy, 100% important. I mean, and both cross-cultural literacy in person and working across time zones. I should actually add it in here, the ability, it's more number 3, like working asynchronously is now a skill set and all the tools. The ability to work in and across teams, super important. Number 4, even though increasingly people's attention spans are becoming shorter, communication skills are still so important. And I'm grading papers, I'm finishing up this class, and most of the students write really well, but sometimes I'm surprised that people's writing skills still are lacking some strong competency in certain areas. And so we're still going to need strong writing skills for quite a long time, and the ability to communicate in diverse formats. And then number 5, the ability, this comes from the lean startup world. If people haven't read the book by Eric Rice, it's kind of one of the most important books in the startup world. He's got a whole bunch of other books, but don't just build something, like test it, see if it's going to work, so that's very important. The next one I'm going to skip over just to save time, but basically there's a wonderful website and organization called 80,000 Hours, which is a terrific kind of community of people and professionals. 80,000 hours is the approximate lifetime that a professional who starts working at 22 works till 65. That's approximately the amount of time you have in your work life. So one of the existential questions is, how in the world do we try to help as many people as possible not build more widgets, but actually make sure their jobs are directly or indirectly addressing the great challenges of today? So I'd encourage you to check that site out. This is, if you're interested in the future of work and impact careers, the World Economic Forum, McKinsey, Oxford, I write on this too. There's so many interesting things. And this goes back to what we started earlier on about the ability to foster continuous learning, is that I'm not going to read the whole quote, but the half-life of a skill has dropped from 30 years to an average of 6 years. So even, for example, if you are skilled at accounting, great career, but understanding how to use digital tools to do better accounting. So it's not like my father was a millennial before there were millennials. So he was an accountant, CPA, a hospice social worker. He bought a donut shop and we lost all our money, but he did that before it was cool. But that ability, like even if you develop a skill set, how do you keep upskilling or transferring your skills to the emerging technologies? So, Malene, I think I'll go back for 1 second. Let's see what the previous slide is. Oops, did I skip a slide? No. This one I'm going to skip. You can just look up 80,000 hours. So one of the things, this is both good and bad. But one of the things, like you don't, in my opinion, obviously it varies country by country and sector by sector. And there's places like in India where if you want to get a job in the civil service, you're facing millions upon millions of people competing for the competitive exams to land jobs. So that's incredibly stressful. But for most jobs, again, if you're not in the civil service, you're not necessarily deciding on your whole life. You're just deciding like what are the skills you need to develop now for the next 5 to 10 years. And the average millennial, at least this is in North America, it's not, I don't want to say it's for the entire world. The average millennial is going to have between 11 and 20 jobs in their lifetime. And that often means switching sectors and careers. So it's not so much like, if you want to be a medical doctor, I had dinner with a friend this week who's studying in medical school in Italy. If you want to be a medical doctor, you've got to train, or an engineer, but a lot of other careers, it's okay to switch sectors, jobs, industries. So this takes away some of that stress of deciding, what do you want to do for your whole life, just what do you want to do for the next few years? This slide I like, it's just some of the job titles that in the research I've done that are likely to emerge by 2030 to 2040. So network weaver already is a job title. I've seen organizations that are hiring for network weavers, that ability to connect and convene internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. And Jennifer's saying she loves network weaver and weaver birds. Actually, I haven't heard weaver birds. And Jennifer's saying, yes, we'll share a copy of the slides and the links with everyone. A nanomedic is like these, nanotechnology is increasing. And so it's like micro interventions around health. Jennifer and I were talking before, a haptic coder. So what that means is in the metaverse, which is gonna, in Web3, the ability to create sensory experiences that people would feel, but they're in the metaverse. So there's all sorts of amazing jobs out there. I'm curious, has anybody heard or thought about, what are some jobs in the future? I'll wait like 15 seconds. And Toby, I see your question. So if you have strong questions, please put them in the Q&A section, because I'm going to go for about 7 more minutes. If you have comments, put them here. But if you have questions, click on the Q&A button and submit them there, because it'll be easier for us to keep track. But I want to wait about 20 seconds. Does anybody have other suggestions of futuristic job titles that you've heard about that are likely to emerge in the next 10 to 20 years? And while we're waiting for that, one of the things about the future work and impact work is, 60% of all the jobs, or 40 to 50% of all the jobs that kids in elementary school will have now, will have in 10 years. So kids in elementary school now, they don't even exist yet. So we can't even foresee all the things. So I see Butaka has a question. Again, please put your questions in the Q&A, because I'm just looking at comments right now. So any other, Jennifer, do you have any future job titles? So Daniel wrote vertical and urban gardener. Yes, amazing. There's a lot of startups working on vertical gardening. Rachel, lead happiness officer. Yeah, that actually already exists. There are companies that have the chief happiness officer, but I do think that that job title is likely to increase. Any other interesting job titles people have seen or expect may emerge in the next 10 to 20 years? Jennifer, do you have any, or anyone from Nexford, from your kind of global perspective? Life coaching, yep, that already exists. I'm talking more about the jobs that will come rather than the ones that are here now. Jennifer, or Nexford, anybody have a specific job title that you find the most unusual? Virtual production, that already exists. A postmortem avatar inventor. This is not my idea. This is, once someone passes away, like what happens with their virtual identity? Do you curate it? Do you sunset it? There's going to be all sorts of interesting things out there. Oops, wait. Somehow I just jumped pages. Let me go back. Why did I just lose this? I'm going to skip this one for time. This values exercise, I'm not going to I'm not going to do it right now, but this is something that I think is quite beneficial for you to think about when you have time in the future. And you can adapt this however you want, but basically the idea is you have 100 points, total of 100 points you can allocate, and think about the values that are important for you in your work life. And so, for example, if salary is important, it might be because you want to be financially independent, or it might be you have a lot of responsibilities to your family or community. Then you might say, salary, I'm going to give 25 points, allocate 25 points to that. If you really want to focus on social impact careers, you might say that's 10 points or 20 points. So the idea is looking at these values and spending time deciding how important they are to your unique situation can actually help you in deciding and filtering what kind of social impact jobs do you want to go to. And you can add other ones. So if we had more time, I would jump into this. How to find your what around, I think we're gonna go about 4 more minutes, 5. How to find your what. These are just some tips. Be curious, experiment, upskill all the time. Adam Grant, the social psychologist I mentioned from Wharton, has a book called Give and Take. So when you're reaching out to learn or upskill, don't be a taker, in terms of transactional relationships. Be someone who contributes value, whether it's on LinkedIn, in your community. We'll talk about fellowships. One of the things I found for me, I've had good mentors. So I've been fortunate to have 3 years of my professional life on full fellowships, or 4 years. And, I was a Fulbright fellow for 2 years. That's a great fellowship. I was a Boren fellow in Bosnia. I had a fellowship for my master's. I've had other fellowships. There are a lot of institutions that are providing funding to people in the social impact space, both to upskill, but also for academic training and, all sorts of programs. And I'll give some resources at the end. And there's a few other suggestions here. This is some tips on networking for impact. And I think I've covered quite a few of these, but be curious, and again, if you're going to ask someone, whether it's a peer or someone more senior, don't just reach out and say, help me with my career. Like, be of value. Build a network with purpose. And this particularly refers to LinkedIn, which Jennifer is also a master at. Too many people use LinkedIn as a place where they want to look for jobs. But if you switch and use LinkedIn as a place to connect with amazing, curious people and organizations all over the world doing interesting work, and you're not asking them for anything, you're just connecting, that'll actually increase your chances of getting a job than if you just go around trying to use LinkedIn transactionally. Where to network with, this is mostly, common sense, but your friends, your alum networks, professional networks, online events. So this slide, in terms of where are the impact careers, this goes back to what we said in the beginning. You can work for a private sector, it could be a multinational, it can be a startup. There's particularly around the world now, there's startups that are, anywhere from ones with, 2 employees in early stage to ones with a couple of thousand that are just doing mind-blowing work and creating employment opportunities in sectors around the world. Working in finance, in particular, it's called innovative finance. Nonprofits and philanthropy, INGO, international non-governmental organizations, NGOs, foundations, community-based organizations. So again, similar to what we started in the beginning, in my opinion and research, too many people say, oh, I want to work for the Ford Foundation, which Ford is amazing. Their current president, I think, is one of the most brilliant non-philanthropic leaders in the world. But it's not so much about the organization you want to work for, like what impact or change do you want to have? And often you can do that in any one of these areas or sectors, or multiple ones at the same time. And these are just some tips. This one we're going to skip. In terms of just exploring, how to upskill, these are some resources. So Nexford, other places, where you can do free or very affordable online learning. Philanthropy University is a good resource. Acumen Academy, Humanitarian Leadership Academy, PCDN, my startup. This is a list of some fellowships. It's not complete. The Pro Fellow is a social enterprise a friend of mine, Vicki Johnson, runs, and it's one of the best fellowship databases in the world. The Tony Alumo Foundation, which has funding every year. They give about 5,000 startups or early stage startups funding in Africa. I think it's 5,000, and they have a new fellowship on writing. PCDN has a lot of fellowship resources. We share Rotary, International Institute for Education, Schwartzman Scholars, which is like a modern day Rhodes Fellowship. So they provide 100 full fellowships every year to do a master's in China at one of the best universities, and they take students from all over the world. Knight Hennessy, which is funded by Phil Knight, from the founder of Nike shoes. They have full funding to do graduate programs at Stanford, Atlas Corps, which is like a reverse Peace Corps. And then volunteering is also super important, and those are some resources. Before I close, I think I'll show the remote work slide and one other. So one of the really good opportunities, because I know Nexford learners and people watching the webinar come from around the world, is leveraging the power of remote work and remote impact work. And for people who don't know, remote work basically means you can choose, and your employer gives you permission to work from wherever, whether it's in an office, on the beach, at home. You don't have to be anywhere physically, you just have to do the work. And increasingly, remote work is very popular in the tech world, but it's starting to grow in the social impact world. So for example, I've got a friend, I won't say in which country, but lives in South Asia and works for a US-based social impact firm. And the hours can be a little difficult, but it's mostly asynchronous work, but they're making a US salary living in South Asia and also doing incredible impact work. So one of the best ways to think about advancing your impact career is really, because there are all sorts of visa restrictions and challenges, is thinking about how can, another person I know in West Africa, I won't say which countries, is in West Africa and worked for all sorts of West African organizations, but now is working for a US-based one, but in West Africa. So thinking about how can you leverage, Nexford is giving you, if you're a student, the power of remote learning, and then thinking about how can you translate that to the power of remote impact work. I'll skip this, and this is the final resource. This is just a few places to find interesting impact jobs. So PCDN, we have all sorts of resources. We have a free weekly newsletter, a podcast, which is amazing. Jennifer's been on it. And then we also have something called the Meta Job List, which is the best list of impact job resources in the world. B-Works is for the B Corporations. Angel List is all about startups, but there's a lot of good jobs. Impact Pool, fellowships I talked about, networks, these are a few, and then podcasts, these are a few of my favorites, but feel free to suggest others. Get Hired is actually from LinkedIn, so that's one of the things I would suggest. LinkedIn, Andrew Seaman, and I'm going blank, the other person is doing really great online streaming. And I think we'll stop here. I went, I think 3 minutes over, but I would thank you everyone for your comments, and I'll stop sharing, and then I guess we'll jump into the questions and comments. And thank you so much for this opportunity, and to Nexford and to Jennifer and the whole Nexford team. I'm gonna
doing a digital round of applause, and I know that everyone is getting wild in the chat because it really has just been, this has been an awesome session. And so to make sure that everyone feels comfortable, you're going to get a link to the recording of the presentation. It will be on YouTube as well, so you can share it with your friends. You will get a badge of participation, so you can share that and share your 2 to 3 takeaways on LinkedIn. If you aren't following Craig already on LinkedIn, you absolutely must be. He's constantly sharing some of the most interesting fellowship opportunities, remote roles, global roles, everything. Anytime I look and find somebody interesting on LinkedIn, I see that they're already connected to Craig. So he is a fabulous person to even, just follow on LinkedIn to see those insights. So we have some really interesting questions that have come in through the Q&A. And Peter, it looks like we answered that first one around the top skills needed. So Craig addressed that in a couple of his slides, so we're good there. And let's see. So we have a question around what would you suggest to do if you already know what you would like to address, I suppose, in terms of the challenges or problems that you want to solve, but you can't find the way to do it?
So great question. Thanks so much, Constanza. And just to say also, Jennifer, there's a group of people on LinkedIn that some people use the term job fairies, but there's about 30, I mean, there's hundreds, but there's like 30 to 50 people all over the world who are just serial sharers of opportunities. And if you search by the hashtag job fairy, I mean, Jennifer's one, I'm one, Nick Martin, definitely, but they're all over the world. And that's one of the best ways to find opportunities, but don't write to them and say, help me get a job. That's not the way to use LinkedIn. Like, follow and engage. So Constanza, so 3 things I would say. The first thing is not all impact work. I mean, we all need to pay the bills unless you're independently wealthy. So, I mean, I acknowledge that. And job opportunities can be very limited. You know, youth unemployment in Colombia is high. And there's an expression in Spanish called the NIMI generation, which is neither in formal employment nor in education. And that's a challenge in a lot of the world, where, you know, also in parts of Western Europe and the US, where just lots of people just struggle to get a job, let alone like a job of impact. So that's the first thing I'll say. So sometimes doing impact work, it may not be your day job. It might be your day job might be doing something, hopefully you don't hate it, like that it's reasonably good, but sometimes like your passion might be you want to build playgrounds and get kids playing, and you can't find a way to do that paid. So you might need to choose to do something else temporarily or for a while to pay the bills that fits your existing skill set in the job market. And then over time, whether it's volunteer or stuff, like try to do the impact work. And then sometimes, and I'd say a good amount of time, if you're strategic and upskill and network and get credentialed, that sometimes you can use your normal job and your impact volunteer work and possibly fellowships or other things to land a job that's more closely aligned with your skill set and passions. But I know people who've struggled for years doing work that they don't like. Sometimes they hate, or sometimes just like it's okay. And I don't want to say like, oh, you find your impact, you map out the job market, you upskill, and magically you're going to have a job. I mean, you know, and sometimes it might. And the other thing is like impact work. And I said this in the beginning, like we need everyone. So graphic designers, admin, financial people, advocates, you know, people on the front. I mean, I have friends who've been shot and kidnapped. Like a lot of people think impact work means you got to be in the front lines doing it. But there's a whole infrastructure, building websites, building apps. Like, so it's also like impact work could be any one of those things. And not everyone can or wants to be doing frontline work. And it also depends, you know, a lot of times the role for people from outside of communities is not doing like, you know, the glorious headline work. It's providing the infrastructure and the networks and the connections and support. So it's also thinking about impact work in a broader range. And then the other thing is also, Constanza, like really broadening out. So I think you're in Argentina, you know, which obviously has some economic challenges, but saying, okay, I want to work on playgrounds and there's no nonprofits doing this. Can I find a job in local government, you know, working on youth education or in schools or so it's also like too many people become attached to it. I want to do X at this institution. And or like finding international opportunities, like Right to Play is a great organization, you know, where they focus on sport for development or joining UN, United Nations volunteers. So it often means taking a step out and saying, what change do I want to advance? And again, it still may not be possible. And then also looking at remote opportunities. So, but I want to acknowledge it's frustrating. It can be demoralizing. And that's why it's really important to be parts of communities of like-minded, whether it's your friends, you know, LinkedIn, PCDN, Nexford, like being part of communities where you can just say like, what do you suggest?
And I think that's what you were saying, and when your question of like what jobs of the future, what I've been seeing a lot lately are these community roles. And like I've been really enjoying following Alexis Ohanian and his venture fund 776, where he's almost exclusively, I think, investing in companies that are powered by community. And when I think about it in its relation to the job search or in our careers and our lives, like when you feel stuck in a situation of like, how can I find, you know, maybe a niche community, whether it's online, in my real life community, even if it's one or two people who are interested or excited about the same thing. And then it's like a domino effect of like that one person knows two other people that knows 10 other people. And then you can really, embrace and that's what like is so effective too. And when we're thinking about building a social impact career or, having a strong job search, is finding crowdsourcing relevant insights from other folks. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Craig. So, and I think this is a question. So Abubakar asks an interesting one that I am also curious about. So I'm getting to be controlling here and deciding which questions are next. But what types of careers can you advise in developing countries and looking from now to the next 10 years? Because I think this is something I see too. We see the future of work and AI and haptic coders. And also it's like, I have load shedding and don't have power for 8 hours a day and I have 3G internet. And you, I know, are, know that context too. So I'd love to, hear more about that.
So I'd say three things. So first, I worked on a project funded by USAID and Rotary a few years ago, and we brought, I was like a lead consultant, I wasn't in charge. We brought entrepreneurs from all over Colombia, particularly from rural regions and diverse backgrounds, working on social entrepreneurship. And it was like amazing. And then they all went back to their communities. And it was even hard to communicate via WhatsApp. So I'm gonna say like, so digital, like lack of connection, lack of power, lack of infrastructure is a huge challenge. So the first thing I'd say one is there's a huge growth in agricultural tech and a lot of social enterprises like MyAgro, 1 Acre Fund, all over the world that are trying to use the best of technology, but not super sophisticated, to help small scale farm holders radically increase their production, because we need to keep feeding the world. So that there's so much going on in agriculture. That's like the first thing. And that doesn't always involve tech. So look, 1 Acre Fund particularly is really strong in East Africa. MyAgro is more stronger in West Africa, but it's all over the world. Then the second thing is really thinking about how to create greater digital opportunity and learning. So I was on advisory board of a great group out of University of Geneva called the InZone Project. Let me just see which was working, I won't go into all the details, but it was working with long-term displaced populations, like in Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camp in Zatari, people who are displaced for years or decades, to think about how do we help create upskilling opportunities that actually, it's not just like a one-off thing. And so there's so much around access to education, both for under-resourced communities or displaced communities or at-risk communities. So, and one of the things they did, you can look it up in the New York Times, I'll try to find the link, but this, they would do like a container in a box. So bring in like a shipping container, equip it with like computers, and then link, and then get some digital access, but they have like facilitators facilitating learning. And they actually even were able to get credits, and some people even advanced to degrees. So one thing is like, how do you bridge these digital gaps? The dream is everybody gets connected, but for people who are not able to be currently connected, how do you bridge that so there's not going to be an ever increasing digital divide? That's another thing. And then the third thing is, my wife and I would do small scale angel investing, like stuff coming out of West Africa is amazing. Like there's one coming out of, it's called Basis. It's out of Kenya, not West Africa, but they're building, we had no car for years in Colombia. Eventually, because of COVID, we had to buy a car. We got an electric car. I'll never buy a gas car again. Electric's still bad, but it's less bad. And so like this is a bus company that is building electric buses for the Nairobi market. So instead of importing these huge buses that don't fit the market, they're building and sourcing them there in Nairobi, because air pollution's, another huge global challenge. So the other thing is like just looking around, instead of saying you want to work for, the UN, like what innovations are taking place in your community, city, or country, and then connecting to those. So there's impact hubs around the world. There's, WeWorks. There's all these creative maker hubs and, all sorts of angel investing and impact investing. So it's also just like digging really deeply. If you live in a smaller city or rural area, it's harder. But if you're in Lagos or Nairobi or Kampala or, Bogota, and any city over like 1 million people, there's just the most incredible things going on. So part of it is, rather than looking outside to, France or the US or South Africa, like what is taking place in your own community or country or region, and then figuring out, can you volunteer, can you upskill, if you have good design skills, like start volunteering with a startup. I mean, like connecting with those hubs, they're all over Africa. I mean, everywhere. And there's a website, I think it's called, one is Impact Hub. We used to work at an Impact Hub in Medellin. There's 100 Impact Hubs around the world. They're seed stars, equally good. But also there's a website, I think it's called coworker.org, which like lists all the co-working spaces all over the world. So part of it is not about jumping outside. It's about, and then again, leveraging the power of remote work. So, because if you have good connection and you've upskilled and you have strong English, then you've got the benefit of, you could go local, regional, or global remote. And you don't necessarily, if you want to move, that's one thing, but you don't have to move. So like that flexibility is such a great thing.
That's great. And I've been finding too, like the research skills is what is so helpful for people when they're trying to find opportunities. But how do you hone them? You hone them by doing, practicing, like going to the gym and using the muscle. And I think one really great way you can do that is by finding, and again, this is a great LinkedIn post that you can make. I'm interested in understanding more about the agro-business, agri-tech space. Who should I be following in the space? What blogs or associations or news should I be following? On TechCrunch, which I try to take a look at every day, you can filter it by region, find out what startups are getting money. When they get that money, they're going to be using it to hire people. So then you can take a look and see what different roles they're hiring for. And I think what's really interesting that we're seeing a lot is, that I'm seeing a lot is these startups that are having a hard time actually hiring because they're not large enough to have a full HR team, but they are small, and they're overwhelmed because they don't have enough people. So I literally before this webinar had a LinkedIn message from a founder in Kigali who's like, can you please help us find a program coordinator for this role? And I'll share a link to it in the chat. But if you're following those people on LinkedIn, you're going to see those posts, and then you're going to learn about the cool company and work that they're doing, and then potentially have an opportunity to engage with that work. That's such a good question.
And I put up few resources. So SoundCop Forum is a global meeting focused around like impact investing. So you can look that up. Rest of the World is a great free newsletter funded by Sophie Schmidt, and it's reporting on tech stories from the rest of the world. So not the global north, but more global south. It's amazing. They're hiring for a few roles. Seed Scout's an interesting thing and part of where you can kind of practice vetting startups, and you have to apply there's just so much going on. If you don't have some decent digital connectivity, it does become harder, or if it's just super expensive. Like I know Zimbabwe, some countries, it just tends to be outrageously priced.
Yeah, thank you. So, we have the question around, so Malene is asking, I want to ask about how to make time for upskilling. I'm working full time and I'm trying to attend as many free of charge trainings as possible, but I can't find the energy to do the actual intellectual work for it. And I think that a lot of people probably have this as a challenge.
So I'll say, well, first, it's an amazing question, and we've all hit platform overload. And it's like, there's only so many platforms and communities and groups you can be part of. So I think part of it is saying no, and don't say yes to everything. So again, I think at the beginning, you might just jump around, but like I did a great free course on venture investing offered by Techstars and Kauffman Foundation like 2 years ago. And it was reasonably intense, but it's one of my areas that I need and want to grow in. So part of it is don't say yes, like at a certain point, you can't do everything. So it's like, what is going to contribute the greatest value or is the most interest? And also how engaging is the platform? Because there's so many events I go to where the platform or the way the event is designed is so being talked down to that it's like, you have permission to leave. Like, obviously not always. So it's also try to find the events that fit your personality. Like, is there going to be networking? Is there going to be open space? Is it just talk? There's nothing wrong with talking heads, but like, try to get to the ones where are more community building, upskilling, or using good engagement platforms. And then also think about, obviously, I have a kid, some people have 4 kids, some people have parents. So it's like, and sometimes like, even though we talk about continuous upskilling, like I listen to a lot of podcasts, that's upskilling. I'm addicted to an app I don't have any financial interest called Scribed, which is like the Netflix of books. Like, so it doesn't mean you have to sit down in front of your computer and then, or it could just be saying once a week, you're going to reach out to someone and just have a chat. So like, I don't want to say upskilling means you're sitting all the time doing courses, or, there so many ways to upskill that can be in person or virtually, or it could be saying, or you can also give yourself permission for the summer. I'm not going to do anything for 3 months. Like, I'm just tired. Like, we all need rest, and burnout is a huge risk in any career, but particularly social impact. So I don't want anyone to feel the pressure. Oh my gosh, I've got to figure out what I'm going to upskill, because if I'm not upskilling, I'm going to fail. That's not the goal. It's like, it's find out. I mean, I should get better at Excel. I'm okay. Like, we have a consultant who's like, can do Excel magic. So it's also like finding out, I'll never be as good as him, but it's like finding out, like, what are the things you think would be useful to upskill, either for your own personal enjoyment or professionally. And that, I mean, I don't do strategic 5-year plans or 10. I don't do any, like, I don't do those kind of plans, but some people do. I don't know, Jennifer, what would you say about that? Because it is, I mean, you have 2 kids and you have a dog too, I think, right? Am I making up the dog? You have a dog
Very
too.
good dog,
Yeah.
yes. Well, and I finished my doctorate last year, and during
And
COVID, 2
moved.
children at home and working full time, and it was like, okay, this is a very relevant question, Malene. Like, looking back, I'm like, how did I do it? But I think the example I would use now, and I put this when you asked like what skills we're trying to build. For me, like, I'm trying to learn to speak. I want to be able to have a proficient elementary conversation in Chichewa by the end of the year. That was my goal I set in January. And so then that's like the larger goal. So then now you break it down and think, well, I'm not just going to wake up tomorrow and be able to speak it. And also, there are not many, if there are, there's not many Chichewa language podcasts. I could listen to the radio. So then I, said, okay, well, what's realistic? I can do 1 hour of language training a week. So now I meet with somebody 1 hour a week, and we do Chichewa lessons, and I'm able to, like, I feel myself making progress toward that goal. Now, I don't have it a specific one of like, it's not like with, what is it, UN languages, where I can reach a certain level, or that I'm trying to be graded in that way. But, I know what my overarching goal is, and then, breaking it down into smaller pieces. So I think, Malene, and for everybody else, just think about, do you want to, what are you trying to work toward? And this is also what I advise a lot of our students and learners on, of not losing the end goal or the end, like, ultimate objective, even if it's not a finite by December 31st, but if it's, I would like to have the flexibility to move to another city, or, whatever it is. And then you really have to sit down and break it down into some manageable pieces and decide how much time you're able to dedicate to it. So let's see. And I think this is, let's see, maybe we can do 2 more questions. Is that okay, Craig?
Sure.
I like this question from Jesselyn that I think, so I'm currently working as a marketing manager for a consulting firm outside of the social impact sector. How can I begin to make that transition to a social impact role?
So a couple of thoughts. So one, there's a great social impact organization called RippleWorks, which was, I have a couple of friends there. I've been talking to the team just about different things, and they did a report in probably 2017 called The Talent Deficit, looking at the 4 social enterprises, so for-profit social impact ventures. A lot of people think the biggest challenge is raising money, and not all organizations, a lot of companies don't need to raise money. Sometimes it's the wrong decision. And this research was based more in North America, but they said some of the biggest challenges is not about money, it's about talent. And what Jennifer's talking about, and a big part of that talent is marketing and sales. They're 2 different things, but connected. So if you are a brilliant marketing professional and you can develop compelling campaigns, use the right tools, whether it's HubSpot or whatever Salesforce or whatever CRM system, if you're really, really strong at marketing, whether it's on the communications end or the data end or the ad spend, then what your job as a job seeker is to demonstrate to employers in the language that's relevant to them. Like you have to translate your skills and stories to their needs. So you don't, if you want to work in social impact marketing, you don't necessarily need to have social impact experience. You need to be a brilliant marketer. And then you need to provide a compelling story. Like you might need to have an in-between job, or do some extra, you can do some consulting work on the end, or if a friend's got something that you can work with. But sometimes it's not about switching, it's not about upskilling more, it's about telling the story about the metrics. Like, I mean, it's hard to say without knowing more details, but you might say, I ran marketing for this company for 5 years and I increased sales by 300%, or, I got the best return on investment. And then it's not about your skills, it's about telling the story about how those skills are going to help this social impact organization communicate or market better. So that's one thing. The other thing is you can do things like classes like through Nexford, Philanthropy University, like you can also, or LinkedIn Learning has a lot of good stuff. Yeah, it's also about, maybe you're not going to switch jobs right away. You might do 2 classes at Nexford and 1 on LinkedIn Learning around social impact marketing, or like, so sometimes it's not about getting another job, it's just about upskilling a little more, or finding a nonprofit or social impact or co-working space in your community or online. And so, I mean, if you're a strong professional, you should get compensated. If you're junior stage, you might say, hey, can I help with this for free? Come up with a creative job title. Don't just call yourself an intern. Like say, I'll give you 20 hours of my time if you call me a social impact marketing consultant. And maybe you're not paid for it, but like, so there's all sorts of creative ways to do it. And then the other thing is mapping out like social impact communications. I mean, there was an interesting thing I just read about. It was a TV thing about marketing. I was in Paris. I mean, I was teaching peace building, but it was Paris Fashion Week. So the city was like, I was there for a month, and like I went to this one place and people were standing and screaming. Like, it was just fascinating. A lot of people are saying like the PR industry is dying. I mean, traditional PR ad agencies are dying. Not advertising will not disappear. There is a radical growth in social impact communications agencies, where some are B Corps, and then others are just traditional marketing agencies that are trying to say, hey, we're not just marketing products that are destroying the planet, like coal. Like, so part of it is like understanding the marketing impact industry and where are the organizations that are more ethical. And there's lots of global ones that will hire anywhere. So like, or could you start one on your own? Or so I'm saying none of these are easy things. It's not like you start marketing and you go, someone's going to hire as a social impact marketer. It takes energy and time and footwork. But in my experience, if you do it consistently, like the research, upskilling, networking, 6 months to a year, with some understanding of what is a potential goal, then you're likely to have strong results. But if you say, like, I'm going to apply for 2 impact marketing jobs next month and nothing happens, so it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. None of these things. I mean, so it's that kind of attitude, and then also there's so many online events now. The other thing is, I mean, I'm just trying to think who I just saw. Like, I've been to their conference, Concordia Summit is like having an event in New York. The other thing is like find impact events, whether it's in person or online, and try to engage, get paid, or volunteer to help with their marketing. And not like a one-off event, but like something that's a conference. And that's even a better way. So find like a social impact conference and either be a volunteer, a marketing volunteer, a paid consultant, do that 3 or 4 times. And so, I don't know, Jennifer, you have any thoughts?
Well, I just love it. It's such a great question. And I feel like you've given so many good practical examples, and something, mentioning these conferences, I'm thinking about Tech Change. I'm thinking about the career pop-up that you just hosted, where both of those opportunities, you were looking for volunteers to do marketing, to be part of the event itself, event hosting, and they're nearly endless. And when I work with, or when I engage with our marketing learners, I think, how are you applying your marketing principles to yourself and your job search? So what I would recommend to somebody to do in your situation is, and I think it was Jesselyn that asked this, I'm not sure, is make a list of 10 companies that you want to target, 5, choose a number that you're comfortable with, and then say to yourself, okay, over the next 6 months, how can I apply what I would recommend them to do internally myself. It's so easy almost now. You can make a LinkedIn post once a week with job opportunities. Craig's talking about being a job fairy. Signpost people to events that they're hosting. Over time, you start tagging them, identify who their people are that work on their team. They're going to say, thank you so much for spreading the word. They have their marketing team who are over there hustling, trying to get their numbers up, doing so on and so forth. So how can you, and again, Craig referenced this give and take from Adam Grant, be a giver, and you don't know what's going to happen in the end on the other side, but ultimately it's going to build your own personal brand and thought leadership and presence in whatever industry or space you're trying to grow in. And you're simultaneously shining more light on you and the target companies that you want to approach. And I think
I just want to make one last comment. So the other thing that I always recommend people consider, like if you have a burning question and you think there's not an easy answer that people can find, then if you have the time, like, if you don't have the time, don't stress. But if you have the time, like if you said to someone, oh, can I have 20 minutes of your time to talk about my career? Some people will say yes, but a lot of people are like so busy, they're going to just be, but if you said like, oh, I'm doing research on social impact marketing organizations in West Africa or whatever place, because I know there's a gap, and I would like X amount of your time, and at the end, I'm going to like give it back in a blog post or pod. So one of the best ways to build your expertise is it could be a research project for a class, or it could be do a limited podcast series or live streamer, like where you're becoming the expert because you have the excuse. And if you say it's for your career, people are going to be turned off. But you say like, I'm an experienced professional and I found this gap and I want to help the community and I'm going to give it back. Then you've automatically crafted yourself as one of the experts. And you've got an excuse, if you reach out to 50 people, probably 25 will talk to you. So instead of saying like, help me, you're going and saying like, I know lots of people are frustrated. Like, how do we build more digital social impact market? So like you're mapping that. One of my students just showed me a website. It wasn't for my class, but they built like a global directory of sustainable fashion companies. How cool is that? So it's like, we can just put together like a website. These are the top 10 digital social impact marketing agencies and whatever. So it's like something where you're giving back to people beyond just your own interest.
I love it. And we are at time. We have thank you so much for everybody for your fabulous questions, to Craig for your time.
Thank you,
You will
everyone.
get a copy of this presentation, recordings, links, a badge to share. Would love to hear your takeaways on LinkedIn. Feel free to tag Craig and me, or not, as you wish. On behalf of Nexford University, I'm Jennifer Bongura, your Director of Career Innovation. And again, what a wonderful session. Digital round of applause. Look at this incredible session. I'm so energized. I love it. So thank you again. And we look forward to being in touch. Bye, Craig.